Hey everybody, this is Brian.
And this is Josh.
Welcome to the podcast for Curiosity Continuum.
Curiosity Continuum is an industry-innovating, non-traditional company passionate about growing wisdom in the next generation.
We are the essential bridge between the analog and digital worlds by building collaborative communities that unleash the power of adaptive expertise and innovation needed to thrive in the 21st century.
We combine and mix essential elements needed to empower people to succeed in new ways, not possible outside of a creative, thoughtful, diverse community of fellow curious people.
Follow us on your favorite podcast app to receive notifications of new content. If you like what you hear and want to dive deeper, visit us at curiositycontinuum.com. Thanks for tuning in. Let's start the conversation. Josh, you bring us a topic today. It's Europe.
I'm up, not Europe. So it was, yeah.
Well, you not Europe, the country.
The country? I mean, come on. What's your problem, Brian? That's a continent.
My problem is you're not telling everybody what the episode is.
So the episode is Paralysis of Choice, which is something that I feel that we're inundated with. Did you want to expound upon that?
I was hoping you would kind of give a little bit more into that.
Okay, so
I can definitely talk.
I know.
I can talk.
So what I was thinking about with this was we have paralysis of choice in everything we do today. And it really started, like for me, when I started watching Netflix and I saw all the choices there. And I would just scroll through them. And then like 45 minutes later just say, screw it, I'm going to bed. And so I also see this choice today, though, in a lot of things, not just like watching shows. I mean, we have apps on our phone. We have, lots of things that people are like, oh, I have so much choice. I don't have to make a decision. Or it's really hard to make a decision. So I just want to talk a little bit about how that affects our everyday life, I think.
So let's, I realize I've said so a lot sometimes.
I do that same thing, but I say like for some reason.
Well, we worked really hard, folks, to get that down. We're going to try to crunch it back down again. I've noticed that I don't end up finding something different because I'm forced to. It's like when I grew up, we didn't have cable TV, and I had to go to your house to get any kind of semblance of like diversity of programming,
right?
Other than public television, and Channel 3 was my friend because I could put it on and put a VCR tape on or Nintendo, that Channel 3, but there was nothing there but snow. Sometimes I just fell into something because I wanted to watch television, for example, and I'm like, I have no idea what this is about. Sure, I'll give it a try. Now, sometimes it was absolutely bleh. But you get that same bleh feeling right now with Netflix or any other streaming program. But you kind of like, I think that you don't get forced to have to try things. It's like almost vegetables for some children. They don't like vegetables. Now, my children actually like vegetables, so it's kind of funny. But
yeah.
You're not forced to try anything because you think, well, I'll just find something that I like. And it's familiar.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I think that's where it is. Like, and I'm saying like a lot again. However, I don't know if that is the solution. You know what I mean? Like, where do we come across saying, this is what I want? And do we even know what we want? Or is it just the exercise of going through and looking?
I mean, I'm with you. Sometimes all I get to is I've surfed for choices and I've parked choices for later. But like I never committed
my
to
favorite thing is to put add to my list or watch later or whatever that list happens to be on whatever streaming service I'm on. So, and I don't know if it's just a streaming service thing. Like, is this a thing that's endemic in our society?
Well, I'll tell you what. The Cheesecake Factory menu, goodness
250 items. However, they have like 10 chefs behind, so I don't feel so bad.
Well, I don't feel bad for them. I kind of do because we had friends that were cooks and chefs, and I know what they go through and somewhat, but after I hear the stories, but I haven't been to Cheesecake Factory in many years just because we fell out of our rotation. Cheesecake Factory, hear this, if you want to earn my business back, you may drop some gift certificates.
Hey, we'll be a sponsor. We will be forced to sponsor
Factory.
Cheesecake Factory. I will do so gratefully.
The first few times I ever went to Cheesecake Factory, I was so overwhelmed.
For real.
In fact, I just sat there and I endlessly went back and forth. I'm like, well, maybe this is good and that's good. And so what I had to start doing was actually saying, okay, what's my protein that I want? If I said beef or chicken, whatever it was that night, I looked at anything that was that, but everything else was cut out. And then I would cut out to say, do I want more vegetables? Do I want carbs or whatever? And I would, but that's how I had to do it.
And
otherwise, I would never land on a
I think
decision.
maybe that's a really good pattern to use. So these streaming services, these things that we have all the choice on, dating apps and stuff are the same way, I've been told, where there's just all these people and you just keep scrolling through them. Maybe you should really start taking more of an active approach in all of this stuff. And it's not just consumption. It's also you putting boundaries out there, saying, okay, so I want this, this, and this. Maybe 3 things you're looking for. So I have found myself doing that with Netflix, especially today and the other last couple of days because I've been sick. I said to myself, look, I really want to see an action movie. And once I do that, all of a sudden it comes down to this. It's not limitless anymore. There's real choice now. So maybe this is where we kind of both say, or society says in general, we have to have some kind of limits and put in place. And why are those limits good? And when we go to that, that's the choice we make. We're not making the choice of what we watch, but the choice of what we limit ourselves to.
When you have limited choices, it drives action.
Right.
Right? Now you could choose that, well, hey, I don't like any of it and shut the TV off and go to something else.
But that's a choice.
Example, right? Well,
but that's a choice you made.
You're actively choosing. Say it again, Josh.
I was just saying, well, that's a choice you made.
Right. I know that if there's not the time pressure or the whatever pressure to see something, I don't necessarily decide. So here's a great example of this. What's nice about streaming is I just pause it and I'm like, oh, I'll come back to it, right? Sometimes Sabrina will come and say, oh, I hate to bother you. So it's streaming. I can just pause it. It's always going to be there, right? I come back to it and sure enough, it's right where I left it. Broadcast television, when you think about it, if you didn't have a VCR that could record it, you kind of had to catch it when you caught it, right? And everybody kind of enjoyed it all at the same time. And that's really something where, with the endless choices, it actually can be paralyzing for action. So the paralysis of choice is because there's so many things that are an option. We've probably lost the ability just to say, okay, here's the focal point. Like you said, here's the action movie. So what are we doing nowadays to constrain ourselves and try the exercise? Because I honestly see more people saying well, what else is out there? Because that's almost the dopamine rush to keep you think you're discovering so much and you're doing nothing.
Right. And maybe in a year or so ago, people weren't really doing that. And that maybe was the problem. And now people are kind of coming forward and saying, maybe I do need to constrain myself somewhat. And I think we're seeing that on the macro scale. We're not seeing on the individual scale yet, but we're seeing it on the macro scale. With very specific things. So example, politics. We're also seeing a very dynamic shift between men and women, younger men and younger women, where they're almost flip-flopping roles a little bit in society, where a lot of men are becoming more conservative in their views where before maybe when we were younger they would be more liberal in their views. What I mean by that is not like liberal politically, but maybe just liberal like in thinking. And the women are becoming more like today they're becoming more liberal. Where we were kids, the women might have been more conservative thinking. Not politically, it's just the way of thinking. I think we're seeing that flip in real time. And this, I think, boils down to this whole idea that we had a lot of choice for many, many years. And so we're seeing that like kind of flip-flop in a lot of people saying, nah, I don't really like the way I was. I don't really like the way I'm doing this. And it just happens to be kind of, you know, on the back end a little bit. I don't know if you feel that or not.
You know, I'm all about changing up constructs and frames,
Yeah.
as you and I both love doing. Sometimes what happens when you do that, you don't feel like the choice is reversible. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, so as a society, as there are things that are really good things to be like moving forward and progressing, right? But there are some things where just because the culture or the society progressed in a direction, it doesn't mean that the old was bad. It just was what it was. I think we're very quick to vilify what was to say, well, here's something new.
Sure.
Well, it might be new. It doesn't mean it's better, right? And for example, so I've been reading this, some of the things I think you're referencing in terms of young people choosing actively to have more of a traditional role,
Right.
where there's, you know, male, female roles as defined, you know, a few decades ago, and they're happy with it, right? Now, what's crazy is that society would say, well, shame on you or boo on you. Why are you choosing that? This is not today. It's like, well, isn't that a valid choice for them to go do that if that's their choice? Then they've constrained themselves to say, hey, we're choosing the constraints, right? I want this role. My partner wants this other role, and it works for us. So they chose something. It wasn't something that necessarily went in the direction where everybody thought they should go. But I think to me that's a great representation of free will. You can choose the constructs by which you are kind of focusing your life.
Yeah. And so the paralysis really doesn't happen there because you made the choice. And you've constrained yourself.
Well, here's like you can now kind of run in the direction
Exactly.
to go, well, here's what I got. Even the most successful leaders and motivational people and stuff like that, they always talk about, you know, not limiting your mindset, which is a very common thing, which I don't disagree on its face. However, what they also tell you to do is get hyper-focused, right? And then that's the thing that you don't have the limits on. Like your life becomes this thing because you are focused and you're doing the thing.
So what we're saying is, or what you're saying, and I'm saying too, in a roundabout way, is if you make the choice, the beginning choice, the paralysis of choice really doesn't have to creep in, because you do the first step, and the first step is the most important step, right? Like just doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where a lot of people, especially in society and with all the stuff we have, are making the choice. They don't choose the first step. They think like society is going to tell them what to do. And it's really not.
Right. There was a clip I saw recently of Michael Jordan. It was an old clip where he talked about taking the shot. You know, he said in basketball, there's really two outcomes if you take the shot. You either make it or you don't. And he said, every shot I take, I think I'm going to make it.
Well, yeah, you don't throw the ball if
He
you
said,
don't.
obviously, I don't make
Right.
every shot. Yeah. And if you lose the game, you come back the next day and you do it again. But he's chosen then to step up again and again and again. And really the longevity and of the consistency of doing it is really a hallmark of great
So
success.
even think back to even farther, like to another sports analogy would be Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth got up and he made a whole ton of home runs, but he struck out a whole number of times too. So I think the real, like more than he made home runs, like probably 50% more. So I think the whole idea is you need to take your shot. Like step up and take your shot, right?
At that point, what it does is it frees up mental resources so you don't have to suffer on the choice.
And I think, like, exactly. Right. And boil this down, like, remember when we were kids, Brian, and you wanted to ask that girl out on a date, and you were like, in your mind, you're doing all the things. And as soon as you ask her out and she says, "No, I'm not interested," it was like, oh, it was totally liberating. At least to me it was. I was like, oh, all right. And then I can just, that whole part of my brain that was thinking about that, I can go do something totally different out with.
You told everybody that girls said no to me. Josh,
Well, it said to me too. I mean, many girls said no to me.
Well,
I mean, it wasn't even close to how many said yes.
oh, funny. So you know what? Here, so last thing on that, I think we probably have a good place to put a comma. Years ago, I talked to a guy, and this is when dating apps they weren't new, but they aren't like such a foregone conclusion now as they are now. Because it was about 10 years ago. And he said to me, because I was on this gig, and I was like the only married guy. I'm sorry, there were 4 guys, and 2 of us were married, and 2 of them were not. And the one guy was dating or trying to date, and we were talking about this particular dating app. And he goes, "Oh man, I love that app. I found my last 3 girlfriends on that app." And I'm like, "Did you hear yourself? You just said I found my last 3 girlfriends."
Right.
I'm sure you can find somebody quality on a dating app because I know people that have. However, it might be better just to go to the restaurant, to the bar, whatever like that, or your church or something, and find somebody in that group. Because now your choices are what they are, right? It's not the great exploration out there. You're actually like focusing your life and doing it.
Right. So I think the takeaway here is you got to make the first step. Whatever that happens to be, you got to at least do the first step.
Because that's motion.
And object in motion wants to stay in motion.
Ooh, very scientific of you.
I think that's good. Why don't we leave a comma here?
Until next time, this is Brian.
And this is Josh.
For Curiosity Continuum.